What do all of these things have in common? Well, besides being video games. This. The Roland JV-1080. A black box that helped define the sound of an entire era of not just video game music, but music in its entirety. Released in 1994, the JV-1080 is a rompler, a type of synthesizer that uses pre-recorded audio files. It was part of Roland's famous JV series. And while it wasn't the first or last in the line, it became arguably the most iconic. So much so that many later Roland synths were essentially just expanded versions of it, with a whopping 64 voice polyphony and a massive preset bank filled with everything from lush orchestral strings to dreamy synth pads to acoustic guitars. The JV-1080 became a cornerstone of music production for composers and producers alike. So why did the JV-1080 become such a staple for game composers in particular? The answer may shock you. Just kidding, it's actually pretty simple. It comes down to flexibility and a massive preset library. Right out of the box, the JV-1080 comes with a stunning 512 stock presets, 128 of which being the standard general MIDI patches. And what made it even more powerful was the ability to expand its sound library with JV-80 expansion boards like Orchestral, World, or Vintage Synth for a seemingly infinite number of possibilities.
Installing the Wave expansion boards into the JV-1080 is dead easy.
With this little thing, any musician could compose tracks in virtually any genre. This made it perfect for video game soundtracks, which famously cross genre lines all the time. Considering just how versatile it was for its time, it's no surprise that the JV-1080, among other similar modules, is partially responsible for some of the most iconic video game soundtracks of all time. It found popularity at around the same time as CD audio started to really solidify its place in video game music. There are countless examples of its use in pre-recorded audio tracks, and here's just a few. While CD audio may have been hitting hard at the time, in many cases composers would team up with audio programmers to sample a single key press from a preset or patch. Then that sample would be compressed and imported into the game's data. This allowed that single sample to be used to perform music using the console's sound chip or audio engine. Coincidentally, this is exactly how the sounds from the JV itself were made, except that they were sampled from live instruments and compressed to fit the limited storage of that old 90s hardware. Similar to the rompler itself, back then games had pretty extreme limitations with respect to the amount of bandwidth or space for files. So they often used MIDI sequencing or some equivalent with those now double compressed samples to sort of approximate a live performance. And while those samples are still recognizably from the JV-1080, they take a noticeable hit in quality in exchange for that smaller file size. In some cases, this was done not just to save space, but also to reduce load times.
CD から読み込んでるから曲を読み込むたびに音色を読みに行かなくて済むわけですよ。だから音楽はね、セブンに関してはどんなところで音楽が変わってもロードは時間かかんなかった。これがスムーズにバトルと街の切り替えもフィールドの切り替えもパッチリだぜとか思ったら、絵のやつらが思いっきり容量使ってるんだから。
It takes a lot less time to load a collection of small samples and note data than it does to load a single pre-recorded track. So instead of just playing a recording, the game and console are performing the song for you. It's kind of sweet in a way. Let's have a listen to some popular examples of the double compressed samples of the JV-1080 in video games, and compare them to their origins on the original hardware. As you just heard, this synth was, and still is, a very flexible tool. And it wasn't just popular in video games either, it was all over. Shows like Hey Arnold and Smallville used it extensively. And almost every trance and dance electronic song from the 90s and 2000s featured it very heavily. Interestingly, the way these samples were used really solidifies their identities in their respective games. Though they all use the JV-1080, and it may be recognizable, there is a noticeable difference in texture that goes deeper than just sample rates and compression. Every time a different composer or sound programmer sampled a single note press, they may have used different audio cables, different hardware, different noise gates, different software, different compression. And though it may only be double sampling a pre-recorded sound, there are so many little factors that go into how its texture may have been altered, and not to mention how console hardware played those sounds back to the player. This is precisely what fuels my fascination with SoundFonts, which are a modern way to use the samples found in a video game's files. You could find the same sample in 100 different games, but it would carry very unique qualities in each one. If I sound excited, it's because, to me, the JV-1080 is a very special piece of hardware, and one that I fiercely coveted as a video game music-obsessed kid. I finally got my hands on one just this year as a birthday gift, and my inner child is so happy every time I play with this thing I just want to scream. There is technically a software VST version, which I have had the pleasure of trying out, but if I'm being honest, the sound that comes out of it is just not nearly as rich and full as the hardware itself. But enough about my opinions, now I want to hear from you. What's your experience with the JV-1080? Have you ever recognized its sounds in a game or a movie or a song? Maybe you've used the sounds yourself in something. Or maybe you're more of a sound canvas person, which I respect. Let me know in the comments. I love romplers like the JV-1080 so much that I decided to make my own. Well, in software form. It's called Guy Engine, and it features over 500 handcrafted samples inspired by retro video game music. It's got 3 timbres, a step sequencer, and tons of presets, including a full general MIDI library. I would love for you to check it out and be part of the community that's keeping this kind of music alive and thriving. Hey everyone, SoundFont Guy here. I'm editing this video and I'm realizing just how awkward it is. This is the first time that I've ever recorded myself into a camera with a script. So you can very clearly tell that I'm reading from a script the entire time. So thank you in advance for being so patient with me as I try something new. Last but not least, gotta shout out the patrons. Scruffington, Cryonic Sage 7719, Dean, SampleText64, Irian, Ethan Isaiah Kirshner, Devox, Justin Hawes, Jay Quinn, Pineapple Man, and Selena. Thank you all very much for your support. Couldn't do this without you. Bye.